I live with my parents in the city. I have a younger cousin on my father's side, whose mother works abroad and comes literally once a year. My sister is 4 years old, and she has been living with her grandmother in a small village since she was 3 years old. While grandma was still full of energy, she coped well with the household, but later her health began to deteriorate. Her parents wanted her to sell her house in the village and move in with my sister. Grandmother did not agree for a very long time, but then she decided. I just asked her to live there with her granddaughter for the last summer. And I came to visit them. Grandma's house is very nice, spacious. It had 3 rooms and a kitchen, toilet, bath. Everything was on the street. There was a separate small nursery for my sister, and when I arrived, she asked me to spend the night with her. The whole day of my arrival, she told me about a live doll that lives in her room. If translated from a child's language into a more understandable one, the description sounded like this. This so-called doll got out from under the bed a few minutes after the clock in the hall struck 2 in the morning. The little sister didn't see the doll's face, but it was something hunchbacked and of medium height. My sister told me that she didn't sleep until exactly 2 in the morning and sat outside the door waiting for him. The first thing the doll does, according to her, after it gets out from under the bed, it abruptly jumps onto the bed, and then just starts to wander around the room. When the first cock crowed, she ran under the bed again. When I asked my sister why she wouldn't tell her grandmother or run away from her room, she said quite calmly that if she told, the doll would disappear. She thought it was a movie where she was the main character, and nothing bad ever happens to the main characters, so she was sure that the doll would not touch her. In the evening, when everyone went to bed, my sister and I just lay in bed until about 1:30 and talked. I told her about our city. Suddenly, she abruptly jumped out of bed and started pulling me out the door, because the doll was coming soon. By that time, it seemed to me that this was complete nonsense, because a small child can't help but be afraid of what she just told me. But my sister insisted and said that if I didn't want to go out the door, then one day I would just leave the room. I went with her. About half an hour we sat quietly and were silent. 2 o'clock struck. After a few minutes nothing happened, and I wanted to get out of there and go to bed, but just one sound made me cling to those boxes out of fear. Something really jumped out on the bed with such force that if there was a sister lying there, it would have crushed her in 2 counts. Noticing that there was no one on the bed, this black shit carefully got off her and began to move slowly around the room with a terrible sniff, as if in search. I was just seized with some kind of paralysis. It seemed like she was about to see us. The sister sat quietly and motionless. There's a great angle from behind the door, and this thing could have spotted us easily as soon as she got off the bed. It seemed to me that it had been going on forever. She just half crawled around the room, but did not go beyond it. I would like to note that she did not look like a doll at all, but suddenly she came out. At least that's what I thought. There was silence for about 3 minutes, and then there were jeers from the other side of the door. Then they subsided. Scratching on the door began. These sounds became stronger and stronger. I couldn't stand it here. I closed my eyes, grabbed my sister and ran out of the room into the courtyard with a terrible scream. Grandma and several neighbors came out. I was hysterical. This could only happen in horror movies, but not in real life. It seemed to me that I was crazy, but at the same time I was sure that it was true. Of course, no one believed me. My sister just stood there and said that the doll scared me. But who would believe a 4-year-old? The last 2 days we spent the night in the hall together. All the necessary things were taken out of the nursery, but they did not enter the room. My sister says I'm probably too big, so I scared the doll. I can't believe that for 6 months the child was tearing his psyche. Question: how did she even know about this doll? My sister either ignores me or says she doesn't remember. I've always been afraid of confined spaces, especially elevators. But for a different reason. I was afraid that the cable would break, that I would get stuck, that the air would run out. I knew it would never happen, but I didn't feel comfortable being in the elevator. In the evening I was sent to the store. I lived on the 11th floor. It was already impossible to go down the stairs, because it was dark, you never know who was there. I had to take the elevator. I pressed the call button and waited. The elevator took too long. Finally, its doors swung open. Inside, everything was painted and there was an unpleasant smell. But I didn't have to choose, so I went inside. Pressing the button on the first floor, I squeezed my eyes shut. After a few minutes, I realized that I was driving for a long time. I've been driving for about 5 minutes. And I would not say that I am driving slowly, on the contrary, very fast. I opened my eyes. The light went out immediately, and I was left in total darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut. The elevator kept going. I felt someone else's presence, as if someone was walking around me. I do not know what it was, but I feel it walking around me. Don't open your eyes. It hissed. My hair stood on end. What kind of creature is this? It touched my forehead. The hand was covered in fur, it looked like the hand of some animal. Don't be afraid of me, I'm your friend, it said. I was still standing with my eyes closed. His hand disappeared, and I stopped feeling someone else's presence next to me. The elevator stopped, I stepped forward and opened my eyes. It was the first floor. Turning around, I wanted to look at the elevator. On the walls it was written, "We will meet again." It was written in blood. I was terribly afraid of this meeting, but at the same time I am waiting for it. Sometimes I dream the same thing in a dream, but it always ends with a phrase. Don't be afraid of me, I'm your friend. This story happened and still happens in the mystical house of my friend. It began inexplicably 50 years ago, when a family lived in this house. Mother, father, and their son. The son was very ill, and at the time of exacerbation he had seizures. His terrible fits of rage always led to bad consequences. His parents protected him from the outside world and surrounded their house with a strong fence, and the whole plot resembled a cage. One day the boy's parents were fighting, and his son had a nervous breakdown again. As a result of the actions performed, my mother died. Soon the child himself could not stand such grief, and the man, left without a family, decided to move to another city. After a while, the newlyweds were going to the ill-fated house. Strange things happened to them, but they tried to convince themselves that it seemed to them, but the house oppressed them more and more. As a result, they said goodbye to the house and to each other. A few years later, the house was occupied by new owners. The owner, without hesitation, decided to demolish the house and build a new one, leaving the foundation. The family life of the new owners was also not going well. They quarreled, got sick and, tired of all this, decided to blame their house. As a result, they divorced and sold this terrible dwelling to other people. And that's where my neighbors moved in. My friend's mom had a wild tantrum when she saw in the mirror, instead of her reflection, the image of a girl with long black hair, with a smirk on her face. The friend herself woke up one day from a loud extraneous sound. In the window, I saw a thin human silhouette. When he went outside, his father found no one, and there were no traces. During the 4 years they lived in the house, there were 3 causeless fires. The most interesting thing happens in the parents' bedroom. There's no way their cat goes in there. And the little nephew of a friend, once in this room, burst into tears and pointed his finger at some ant.